Buddy, good to see you. I'm very thankful. Hello, gentlemen. I'm very thankful for the membership class, and I love teaching the membership class. But I've been yearning to be in here with you guys for Job. I love Job. Um, I love Job as theology, thinking about why we suffer and who God is and why He allows this and how the Lord interacts with the accuser. But I also love Job as wisdom literature that we're supposed to slow down on. So similar to Ecclesiastes, where we think we just know Job. We were taught at one time where we hear, okay, suffering, okay, God lets us go through trials, and then it's like we never read the book seriously again. We don't slow down to read it over and over and over like we might Proverbs. Um, when I think that's the way we're supposed to read it. I think we're supposed to read it over and over and chew on it and really think and grow in discernment. If I could, well, let me just say, I think one of my greatest goals as we would go through this is that all of us would grow in discernment. Because the truth is that most of what they say is right in other contexts. You know, the friends are so right for a different situation. They're saying things that are very true. Some of the times they even sound almost exactly like God does at the end of the book. We're going to see some of that today. And yet they're so wrong. It's the wrong context. They're misunderstanding. They're not speaking rightly about God, and they're not speaking rightly about Job. As we think about life and different situations where there's disagreement and you're talking about things, it's usually not very often that the other person just sounds blatantly wrong. There's usually always threads of truth in what they're saying. Life is harder to discern usually than we pretend it is. We pretend growing up like everything's going to be easy to discern, that there's nothing that takes sharp wisdom and careful thought and really thinking through things. And I think Job shows us differently. Because we sometimes draw the friends as a caricature of they're just totally ridiculous, they're totally foolish, when actually I think they're very wise as well, they're just wrong. And I think so much of what they say is worth being chewed on in a similar way as Job. And I think it does us good to slow down and really think about big issues, think about life and death, and chew slowly on these things. I think one of the big themes that we see is that theme of wisdom, knowing how to make decisions and grow in wisdom. I think another big theme we see is that God wins. He always wins, and he wins against Satan, and we see that in the first few chapters. He also wins against Job, and Job feels that already. Y'all have read that several times. He has this acknowledgement that God always wins. There's nothing I can do. There's no other recourse I have. If he's decided this, then he's decided it, and there's nothing I can do. And we'll see today, if I am going to have an advocate, it just has to be God himself. There's no one else that can change his mind. There's no one else that can prove him wrong. He's never wrong. But why is he acting like this? And at the end, of course, that theme comes back of God does win. He is the one who knows all things. He is the one that we shouldn't question. Job is halfway recognizing that God's wisdom is inscrutable, that it's beyond us, and yet he's still desperately longing to know why. I think another big theme is friendship, but let me pray, and then I want you to turn to another passage. So let me pray. Father, I pray that you would help us be wise interpreters this morning. Help us consider carefully and thoughtfully chew on these things as we grow in wisdom. Help us not be fools. Help us not jump to assuming that someone is wicked and pretending like we know their story. Help us not jump to Job and defend ourselves and pretend like our suffering is so unjust, and when in our case there's usually sin that leads to our suffering. Help us instead be wise. Help us consider matters carefully. Help us see that there are several close answers in many situations, and only one is the most correct. So help us have that kind of careful discernment as we grow in knowledge and grow in wisdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we turn to that other passage, I think one of my favorite warnings from a commentator that I read this week was that he just says, beware of falsely associating with Job. We so often read ourselves as Job in this story when, 99 times out of 100, it is because of our own sin that suffering comes. Or sometimes we see it even in the counseling room. It's someone jumps immediately to associating with the innocent suffering of Job when it's very clear, there is sin in their life. And that's not a Job's friend kind of thing, just assuming there's sin. It's that sin that they acknowledge is there as well. There's something that, one of the things that Eliphaz will say today is that you kind of destroy argument. You destroy an opportunity for argument and really getting to the bottom of something when you jump there. Now, he's wrong about Job. He's saying that Job is destroying the argument, just saying he's innocent. But for most of us, he wouldn't be wrong. And there is a way that jumping just to I'm innocent and I'm suffering destroys any kind of opportunity for the right kind of introspection and the right kind of searching and saying, am I in sin? And how can I do better? And how can I be more wise in these different situations? I like that warning, but I want you to turn to Job 29. To me, I think one of the biggest feelings Job feels is betrayal. And I think he feels that over and over and over by his friends. We're going to see that today. Miserable comforters you are, is what he says. They're supposed to be his friends, and they're just relentlessly attacking him and treating him like he's someone else when they should know him. And they should know that he's not who they're acting like he is. But I think he also feels that from God. And to me, chapter 29 is a good summary of what we've studied so far in his suffering. But also, I think, gives some deep insight to what he's feeling. So look at chapter 29, verse 1. Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. As I was in my autumn days, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter and the rock poured out for me streams of oil." And he goes on to talk about how blessed he was in every situation and his righteousness. But verse 4 again, "As I was in my autumn days when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me." That just stands out to me so strongly. We know, and y'all have seen already, that Job is not pretending like he's sinless. He knows he needed the sacrifices. He knows he needs God's mercy, and he needs God to forgive his sin. He knows this. I think what he's feeling is this idea that God was his friend. He was walking with God. He had a strong relationship with the Lord, and this is not what friends do. I think that's part of what he's feeling. We know this on a human level. Like when we sin against a friend, what makes our friendship strong is that we're able to overlook each other's sins. We're able to forgive. We're able to continue to love even when the sin against us has been large. And I think you have that in Job. He understands he needs to be forgiven. He's not saying he's some perfect person and that he shouldn't experience anything from God because he's never sinned. Instead, I think you just have this reality of, I'm God's friend, and God is my friend, and I've walked with him for years, and I cared about the Lord so much that I'm even sacrificing for my children just in case. Like, I want to honor the Lord, and he's my friend, and why is my friend doing this to me? His earthly friends are saying, God is doing this to you because this is what he does to the ungodly, and you must have done something ungodly. And Job, from the beginning, has said things like, your words are wind. What is rebuke from you? Rebuking. Do you guys remember that? They don't actually know any sin that he's done. They're hinting. They're saying there must be something. And he's saying, you're not rebuking anything. That's not how friends are supposed to act either. The friendship of God was upon my tent when the Almighty was yet with me. All right, turn back to Job 15. I love the book of Job, and I wish I got to be here with you guys as you studied, and Ethan has done such a good job, and Noah did such a good job. If there was a time that I got to jump in, it would be right now. We're in the second cycle, and I love the second cycle. So all the friends have talked once, and Job has responded once. Now we're back to the beginning, and we're going to have Eliphaz. And there's so much for us to chew on in the next few chapters that we'll cover today. But then, again, as the friends keep talking, such rich, wonderful truths, declarations from Job, truths about God, and wisdom for us to consider. So we have Eliphaz, the Temanite. You guys remember him? He was the first friend that spoke. An Edomite from Teman, and he's Job's response to him included one of my favorite lines in the whole book of Job, is that line about can you really rebuke? I should read it because I'm not going to get it right. Back in Job chapter 6, you can turn there. It's near the end of chapter 6. 25, I just quoted, how forceful are upright words, but what does reproof from you reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? I love that line. It's just, if we're really going to love Job, if we are going to love Job, his friends are not loving him, but if we are going to love Job, we need to listen to all of what he says. Sometimes he says things that sound really over here, like maybe, oh no, does Job believe this? And then you realize a few chapters later, no, he says the opposite. He's regularly balancing himself out, but he's also giving full vent to his spirit, and he's saying, do you think you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? Now, I think that should have been a time that the friends listened. This is the first time a friend had spoken, and Job already responds like that. I think the friend should have said, you're right, we need to chill. We need to stop this. This is more inscrutable, I'll use that word again, than we thought. We need to have more discernment. We need to slow down. We need to listen to our friend. They don't. In fact, that response, the speech of a despairing man is when Job gave that to Eliphaz. And now, look at the next time Eliphaz is speaking, chapter 15, verse 1. Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Now, obviously, we don't know if that's a direct response, but it sure seems like it. It sure seems like Job has begged for mercy from this friend, saying, hey, go easy a little bit, I'm suffering. And the friend says, you're right, you are a windbag, and you need to stop talking. Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? You can see what he's saying, right? Job used that line to ask for mercy, and now he's turning it against him and saying, you shut your mouth if you've got windy words. You're not doing any good. Verse 4, why does Eliphaz think this? But you are doing away with the fear of God. Of God is not there, but he's saying you're doing away with fear and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Any observations for that section? I think you can see what Eliphaz is saying. I think many of us would counsel our friends this way, and it would be the right thing to say in certain situations. Hey, you're going too far. the speech that's coming out of your mouth, you're doing away with fear. This is unacceptable. You're giving full vent to this windy speech, and you're speaking in a way that's disrespectful to God, that's not true. You need to practice self-control and wait until you're seeing things more clearly. I think that's good counsel in most situations. Your iniquity teaches your mouth, verse 5. You choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. You see, now there's a charge against Job. He's saying you're speaking like the sneaky people, like the crafty. You're dancing around the truth because you don't want to admit it. And so you're choosing this tongue of the crafty. Instead of just acknowledging the truth, you're finding a way to get around it. Of course, we know that's not true, right? Job is not choosing. He's not trying to be sneaky. He's not trying to hide something and, dance around something. He's struggling with a real reality. The part that I mentioned earlier, verse 4, but you're doing away with fear and hindering meditation before God. Again, this is something very true that Eliphaz is saying, is that sometimes we do this. We do away with the fear of God, and we hinder meditation. We jump to a wrong conclusion so fast that it makes it so we don't actually sit and think and puzzle and carefully consider and be discerning. We're going to talk about that in the sermon today. We hinder meditation about God. We're too quick to get to an answer. Again, I think we do that with the wisdom literature all the time, right? We do that with Ecclesiastes. We ignore that it's there. We think it's a useless book, even if we wouldn't say that. We do that with Job. We think we've gotten to the conclusion already, and so then we hinder meditation on God. And he's saying you shouldn't do that. Eliphaz is saying that. I think he's right about that, except that he's wrong that Job is doing that. So that's the first part. Job is speaking windy words. That's the first thing Eliphaz is saying to him. He shouldn't be speaking this way. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's listening to the sin in his heart, and he's choosing to be crafty in his speech. The next section, verse 7, you could tell what he's asking here. Are you the first man who was born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? What is he saying? Yeah. Are you the one who knows everything? You're the firstborn. Were you there in heaven when you listen? It's interesting he mentions the counsel of God, right? The counsel of heaven. But he's saying, do you know something we don't? Are you the one who knows all things and we who have all these years of wisdom? You're saying we don't know. Verse 9, what do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Now, given chapter 29 that we read, how would you answer that question for Job on his behalf? I would answer for Job on his behalf of he knows God. He knows what God is like. He's God's friend. What in the world is happening? This is not what you do to your friends. That's what I know. I know that God has been my friend for year after year after year, and it's been so wonderful. And why is this happening? Eliphaz doesn't get that. So what do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. Are the comforts of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away? And why do your eyes flash, that you turn your spirit against God and bring such words out of your mouth? What is man that he can be pure? Or he who is born of woman that he can be righteous? What is he saying there? You guys are super quiet today. This is unacceptable. So, what? Right, you can't, everybody's a sinner. You got something you got to repent of. Verse 15, behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt? Whoa. A man who drinks injustice like water. Okay, so now he's gone farther about Job. He's saying like this sin is so bad that it must not be even a little sin. This suffering is so bad that it must not even be a little sin. This must be huge. You must be abominable and corrupt. You must drink injustice like water. That's the true situation here. Is God is bringing on your own head the disaster that you deserve because you've been hiding some disastrous secret sin. That's the charge. And he's saying, so the first thing he says is, you are a windbag. You need to stop talking. You've admitted it. Your own words testify against you, and you need to shut your mouth. The second thing he says is, do you really think that you are smarter than everyone else who lives? Are you the first one who is born? We are very old, and we have this wisdom, the gray hairs, and we've been around a while, and this is true that God brings disaster on the ungodly, so you must be very ungodly because this is a big disaster. Ethan? Yeah. Right. Yeah, I heard one teacher talk about how, this is a teacher a decade ago that Nicole and I listened teach her this book about how it is frustrating. It almost feels frustrating on purpose. Like whoever's recording this is recording the things that are so repetitive and annoying, and like Job is responding, and it's like their ears are blocked. They just really don't hear. Job's going to talk about that today. But there is so much repetition. I think that's true. We are supposed to be frustrated in the book of Job, the way they go around and around and around. I think it's also true that they're hitting the same thing from different angles. As they practice discernment, it's the same thing you might do in argument or even in a counseling case. If you're helping someone walk through marriage counseling, this spouse has this position, and okay, no, that's a little bit wrong, and this spouse comes back and speaks, but it still isn't convinced this person's going to hit it from this angle, and then this angle, and then this angle, and then this angle, and this angle, and this angle. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot of times in the book of Job, that yes, there's repetition, there's also careful scrutiny of actually, in most cases, we would say the same thing that the friends are saying, because most of the time there is this great sin in our life that we can repent of or something like that. Anyways, maybe not most of the time, but a lot of the time. So first he said, essentially shut your mouth, and are you the wisest person who ever lived? Do you have some insight? Have you listened to God? Do you know something we don't know? Because, and then he's going to spout his wisdom again, this is what we know. I'm going to read the rest of the chapter. Okay, so y'all hold on and don't zone out and try and pay attention. Verse 17, I will show you, hear me, and what I have seen I will declare. What wise men have told without hiding it from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no stranger passed among them. I think that's something, by the way, about that's how we know they're very wise men. Okay, we learned this from them, and they were wise enough to have the land themselves, and they were the stewards over this big area, and nobody could argue against them. And so we know that these were wise men who had these blessings. Verse 20, here's the wisdom. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity the destroyer will come upon him. He does not believe that he will return out of darkness, and he is marked for the sword. He wanders abroad for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Distress and anguish terrify him. They prevail against him like a king ready for battle, because he has stretched out his hand against God and defies the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thickly bossed shield, because he's covered his face with fat and gathered fat upon his waist, and has lived in desolate cities and houses that none should inhabit, which were ready to become heaps of ruins. He will not be rich, and his wealth will not endure, nor will his possessions spread over the earth. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will dry up his shoots, and by the breath of his mouth he will depart. Let him not trust in emptiness, deceiving himself, for emptiness will be his payment. It will be paid in full before his time, and his branch will not be given. He will shake off his unripe grape like the vine, and cast off his blossom like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil, and their womb prepares deceit. Now, again, I think you could almost take that section and put it as one of the Psalms. You know, I think you have Psalms that just sound so similar to that. Of that is true. That is what life is for the wicked. It is this emptiness. They chase emptiness, and guess what they get? They get emptiness. And life doesn't go well for the wicked. And God does see the wicked, and He is going to make them pay for what they've done. And yet, it's just so wrong in Job's context. And they're pretending like there's no other option. They're pretending like life is always this perfect black and white where good people get rewarded and wicked people get punished. And that's just not true. That's not true about God. That's not true about life. It's not true about Job. Anything stand out to you in that section before we move on? Yeah, Eric? I think so. I mean, I'm just guessing. But I think that these are old men, and they knew Job, who is younger than them, apparently. And they were friends. And I think, not in a weird way, but I think you kind of have a natural friendship with people like that, other businessmen who are very successful. I think they knew each other. They are called his friends. And so I think there's a way that they have interacted with each other and maybe thanked God together for the blessing in their life and shared wisdom with one another. I think that's all before. I think that's part of why Job feels so betrayed is he's saying, guys, you know me. You know that's not me. And these three friends are saying, okay, this disaster hasn't happened to any of us. It's only happened to you. And this is the kind of thing that happens to the wicked. And so it must be you. It must be your fault. I think they feel like they've been deceived and there's something hidden. And Job is saying, that's not me. You know me. You're my friends. A lot of that was reading in between the lines. But yeah, Noah? Yeah. Right. 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 I agree. It's I think it's that psalm. I think it's Psalm 73 or something like that, where his heart almost slipped, or his foot almost slipped, and he's looking at the rich and he's seeing how good they have it, and it almost trips him up. And then he goes to the temple, and then he remembers the Lord, and then he remembers that their end is destruction, and so it looks good right now, and that's actually maybe a norm, but still they're going to be destroyed. It's like the friends have ignored the fact that this can happen. And the scriptures say that all over the place, right? Even James in the New Testament is talking about how dumb to show partiality toward the rich. Don't you know that the rich are the ones who have been attacking the church? Why would you do that? They're not your friends. And then Paul's saying the same thing. God hasn't chosen what is, can't remember, but he's chosen the lowly. He's chosen you. He's talking to the church. And it's not this black and white picture that the friends seem to have. Okay, chapter 16. Job answered and said, I have heard many such things. I just feel that frustration. I have heard this. And I think by this time you get the picture that this is not just a private debate that his friends are having. This is all very public. There are scoffers. There are people who have spit in his face. Basically, there's a community around Job, and the community is believing the friends. Do you guys hear that? There's a community around Job, and there's a community that's believing the friends. It's like this is almost like a public court case where Job is trying to defend, and everyone's believing the friends. You know, his friends have betrayed him, and everyone's believing them, and they're just assuming he's rotten. And they're treating him like a homeless person who deserves to be homeless and a sick person who deserves to be sick, and his own sin has led to this. We're going to see that later. But so as you hear this, verse 2, Job is saying, I've heard many such things. I know all this. I know everything you're saying. I know that that's a traditional wisdom, and people have been telling me that about me. I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Verse 3, shall windy words have an end? Or what provokes you that you answer? Interesting, right? So he said in chapter 6, are you really going to rebuke a man who's a despairing man whose words are wind? And Eliphaz comes and says, you're all wind. You're just a windbag. Your belly's full of wind, so stop talking. And Job says, no, actually, that's not me. That's y'all. Are they just never going to end? Your useless words, your meaningless words, your words that are so wrong. What is provoking you that you continue to answer? Why are you doing this again? We already went through this once. We've done the first cycle. Now here we go again. The friends are going to talk again. And Job is saying, you're miserable counselors. I know all those things. I've heard all those things. I'm telling you, they don't apply in this situation. Verse 4, I also could speak as you do. If you were in my place, I could do that. This is easy. I could slam you just like you're slamming me. I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. I could do two things. I could be a good counselor. I could strengthen you. Or I could do what you're doing, empty, windy words just slam into you and not understanding the situation. Miserable comforters. Verse 6, if I speak, my pain is not assuaged. And if I forbear, how much of it leaves me? What's he saying there? Exactly. I'm in such pain. Again, lost his whole family. Except his wife, who's told him to curse God. He's lost everything he has. He's pained, and he should be pained. It's a week later, you know. And he's saying, look, if I speak, it's not making it any better. If I stop speaking, it's still there. Verse 7, surely now God has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company. He has shriveled me up, which is a witness against me. And my leanness has risen up against me. It testifies to my face. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. Men have gaped at me with their mouth. They've struck me insolently on the cheek. They massed themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach. He runs upon me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness, although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. All right, tell me what you notice in that section. He's what? Right. Yeah. And he feels like God has targeted him. And again, he knows this idea, God always wins. If I've been the target of God, okay, God, you win. Why am I your target? Why won't you look away from me? Why won't you give some relief? What else do you notice? Yeah. Where's the empathy? Oh, yeah. Right. Right. They had the 7 days of silence, right? And then it became a disaster. 7 days of silence were good. What a good thing to do for a friend. But it seems like instead they were using that time to store up how they were just going to launch into him and accuse him of great wickedness. You know, the way oh yeah, Ethan? Right. Yeah. Although there's no violence in my hands and my prayer is pure. He's saying, I know I have this friendship with God. I know I haven't done some high-handed sin and rebellion against him. I know I'm not sinless. I've asked God for mercy, but I know I haven't done this high-handed sin. I know my prayer has been genuine. I know we've had this friendship. So why is my friend doing this? Why is he so wrathful towards me? And I think that's a spot where we'd say, at this point, since we know the verdict of God in heaven from chapters 1 and 2, we know Job is wrong here, right? This is not some act of wrath. God has not turned against him because he hates Job. That's what Job says. He's torn me in his wrath and hated me. He's gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary, talking about God, sharpens his eyes against me. We know he's wrong about that. That's not why this is happening. Job is confused, saying, my friend should not be doing this. Why is he so angry? Why is he turned in anger at me and become my enemy? We know that's not the real reason this is happening. Those things are separate. God is still his friend. And as his friend, he still allowed this to happen to Job. He talks about how his own body, he shriveled me up, verse 8, which is a witness against me. My leanness has risen up against me. It testifies to my face. And I think its point there is so that, verse 10, men have gaped at me with their mouth. They've struck me insolently on the cheek. I mean, imagine that scene. Unless he's speaking figuratively here, I think it's probably a literal thing that's going on as he just looks so rotten. People are just assuming he's scum of the earth. And I think you can imagine that what the things they'd say, oh man, I used to think Job was awesome. I used to think he was a godly man, and now look at him. Now we all know he was wicked the whole time. Look at him as he's sitting there on the ground, and he's got sackcloth, and it feels like it's sewn to his skin because he's bloody, and then it's sticking to him, and he just looks miserable and awful. What a wicked person that must be. And smacked him while he's on the ground. You know, he's saying, my own body is witnessing against me. It's like this. I can't hide the evidence. It just looks to everyone like I'm just despicably wicked. So I think he knows that it's God who has allowed this to happen. He wrongly assumes that it's because God hates him, and he's acting like not his friend, and he's wrathful and gnashing his teeth at Job. But even then, I think Job knows that's not true, and we're going to see that later. But if he knows God wins, and he knows that all the evidence points to him being wicked, I think he knows at this point, like, there's just nothing I can do. I need someone else to speak for me. No one else is doing it. From man's perspective, I just look as condemned as can be, and all the evidence is against me, even though there's nothing they can rebuke. From God's perspective, he's the one that's mad at me. He's the one who's doing this. Why is he doing this? I think there's just this there's no win here. I can't do anything. Everyone's going to assume wrong things about me. There's nothing I can do. that's when we get into this amazing section of Job. Look at verse 18. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God that he would argue the case of a man with God as a son of man does with his neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. You see what he's saying there? Siri thought I was talking to her. Oh, then she heard it again. Do you see what he's saying? He's saying, I need God to argue for me. I can't win this. I need an advocate. And my advocate has to be God himself. He's the only one who can figure this out and search it out. He's got to argue with himself on this. He's the one. There's no man that can stand up to this. Let me read that again. Verse 18. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. He's saying, don't make this a closed case yet. There's a book that we were listening to on the way back from New Mexico this weekend where there's a girl whose dad is framed for something, and everybody in the kingdom is just assuming that it's her dad's fault, and they close the book, and it just feels like the court case is over when they haven't even looked at the evidence. And as you're hearing that, you're just so frustrated. The case should still be open. Why didn't they consider this other guy that you know who it is? And I think you have Job saying that, saying, don't close the books yet. This case is still open. Don't pretend like, oh, it must be this. Let's close the book. He must be wicked. He's saying, no, let my blood cry out. Let my cry find no resting place. Let's keep the books open. Please, can we keep arguing this? But I can't have a man argue this. No man is going to win. I need God to be my advocate. I need God to argue with God. Verse 19, even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. He's using these court words, right? You got a witness. You've got a person testifying for him. He's saying, my friends scorn me, and so my eye pours out tears to God. Can he do this? My friends aren't doing this. Can God do this? My eye pours out tears that he would argue the case of a man with God, as a son of man does with his neighbor. Okay, when a person, a son of man, has a case against his neighbor, they argue, they open the books, they talk about this. But nobody can argue with God. I need an advocate to argue with God, and that can only be God. I need God to argue the case of a man with God. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. I'm going to die soon. I can't do this. Nobody can do this. I need God. I need an advocate. It's a pretty amazing statement, right? He knows nobody can see the reality of the situation on earth, because it's almost like the right thing to assume is that he's been so wicked. His own body is a witness against him. He needs, only God knows, and he needs God to reveal it, and he needs an advocate. Now, I don't think this is a direct parallel with the advocate language that we see in the New Testament in 1 John 2 or in Hebrews. There it seems like Christ's advocacy for us is about our forgiveness, that he's arguing against an accuser, and his blood is arguing for us, that we've been paid for and the price has been paid, and he's our advocate. So it might not be a direct parallel, but I think you can see that still we have this permanent advocate for us. What Job is longing for, we have. He has too. But what Job is longing for, we have Christ in the heavens as our advocate, who does defend and argue and declare, no, you are a friend of God because of what Christ's blood has done. And so while this accusation might come toward you, um, it's not true. We do have this advocate, and it's something we can be thankful for, but it's something that Job is longing for here. This case can't go anywhere right now. And this is going to be a theme that he starts repeating over and over and over. I need God to do this. I need God to answer me. There's no other recourse. I need God to speak into the situation because it looks like something else. He continues, chapter 17, my spirit is broken. My days are extinct. The graveyard is ready for me. Surely there are mockers about me, and my eye dwells on their provocation. And then I think he's back to talking to God in verse 3. Lay down a pledge for me with you. Who is there who will put up security for me? Again, I think you have legal language there, a different legal setting, but the same kind of thing. God, I need you to vouch for me. I need you to putting down a pledge or security is like co-signing on a loan. He's saying, I need a friend to take my side and do this for me and be my advocate, be my champion. Come and do this. And nobody's doing it, and I need God to do it. Verse 4, since you, again, I think he's talking to God, since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children will fail. What do you think he's saying there? I think he's acknowledging, okay, if this is still stubbornly the case, then God has just not opened their eyes. I think Job is recognizing, okay, they are just blind. These friends, they're just not seeing the situation, and God has closed their hearts to understanding. And so I think you just have him begging God, okay, if you've done that, well, then surely you won't let them triumph over me, will you? You're my friend. Why would you bring the suffering into my life and then close their hearts so that everyone assumes that this is my fault? Since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children will fail. This is not what friends do. Everybody knows that if you have a friend, and that friend entrusts you with different things, and all of a sudden you become a secret informant against your friend, and you're telling other people his secrets so that you can get a cut of his land, well, you're not really that man's friend, and it's not going to go well for you. You're going to be judged. That's what wicked people do. That's not what true righteous friends do. And yet here are his friends who have now given ammo to all the crowd so that people can come up and smack Job because he's just so wicked. That's not what friends do. Surely, God, you're not going to let them triumph. I understand you've closed their hearts, but you're not going to let them triumph over me. Verse 6, he's made me a byword of the peoples. I am one before whom men spit. My eye has grown dim from vexation, and all my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this. The innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. So I think he's saying again, when the righteous people see him, they're appalled. The innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. To me, that doesn't seem like he's talking about himself. He doesn't seem to be growing stronger and stronger in this situation. I think it's something like this is timelessly what is true. I do know that it's true that when you're righteous, you're growing stronger and stronger, or something like that. Or that's what these people are doing. They're not assuming that he was righteous, but this happened. They're assuming that he's wicked and he's godless, and so they're going to keep being righteous and grow stronger and stronger. Verse 10, but you, come on again, all of you. What is he saying there? Bring it. I guess you're just going to talk anyways. You've already done it once. Eliphaz and the other two have already talked once. Now we're in the second cycle. Okay, Here we go again. I guess you're just going to keep attacking me. But you, come on again, all of you, and I shall not find a wise man among you. He's turned to his friends, and he's turned to God and said, you've closed their hearts from understanding. And he's turned to his friends and said, you say all you want, but I'm not going to learn wisdom from you. My days are past. My plans are broken off. The desires of my heart. They make night and day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust? I think he's saying about the people that, he's saying about his goodness, my days are past. I'm going to die. This is no good anymore. Everything's confusing. Verse 12, they make night and a day. The light, they say, is near to darkness. Everything's murky. My body is like a shadow. Everything is twisted and confusing and wrong. And I have no hope. You know, one of the chapters that Ethan covered last week in 14, he seems to be talking this way of like, if you could just put me in Sheol, just go ahead and bring me to death. That way I can't sin against you anymore. Can you just close this off and make it so it's not confusing anymore? Can you just hide me? And I don't know about you, but every now and then I've longed for that kind of thing. I've never necessarily longed to die or anything like that, but I've longed for that kind of thing. Can you just close off this season that I keep messing up in? Or that things are so confusing in, or there's this suffering. I have at times, and this is foolish, I know, it's when I was younger, but I remember reading stories about guys like John Bunyan that were put in prison and thinking, actually, you know, prison doesn't sound that bad. I don't have to make any decisions. I just sit there. I could read the Bible all day long. That's what John Bunyan did. And I could write books, and I could, you know, people take care of me. I got a bed. I got a bathroom in my room right next to my bed. You know, and they feed me, and I don't have to do anything. I'm not responsible for anything. Can you just hide me away where none of this kind of stuff will happen? That's obviously not the way the Lord treats us, right? He wants us to be able to make decisions and be responsible for things and feel the weight of that. But you have this picture at the end of 14 where Job's like, I just wish you would hide me away in death. After death and when I rise again, there's not going to be this sin anymore. There's not going to be this confusion. I'm going to know things. Can you just take this away so that I can be hidden with you? I think he's thinking about being with his friend, being with God. But now, a few chapters later, he's saying, even in that, there's no hope. If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother, my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust? Even in that, there's no hope. I need God to argue my case. Time is running out. I'm clearly about to die, which is not true, but that's how he feels. I'm clearly about to die. Time is running out. I need God to step in immediately, and I need him to be my advocate. I need him to argue with himself. I need him to take my side. He's my friend. He's turned against me. I need him to be my friend and argue for me and be on my side. What do you think? Any closing thoughts? More often than not, I think when people strongly, sharply identify with this chapter, I think they shouldn't. There's so many times where somebody has been harboring a secret sin for so long, and it has wreaked havoc in their life. And then they're acting like all this suffering is someone else's fault, and God has turned against them, and they've been so righteous, and that's just not true. But For Job, it is true. And I think that there's so many things that we can understand about this, that we can feel in certain situations, that we, as we grow in our friendship with God, that we know him, we've read his word, we love him, he is our friend, we try and do what he wants us to do. And we have this relationship that to yearn for God, to make things right, to tie it up in a bow, to seal it and make it good and declare what's just when things are so confusing and they're not working out the way that we thought they should. I think we can feel some of these same things that Job does. And I think it's right for us to cherish the friendship of God and to understand that he's not someone who pretends to be our friend and then turns against us and hates us and gnashes his teeth against us and is full of wrath. We know that's not true. We have more knowledge than Job has. We have more knowledge about God. We have more knowledge about what Christ has done. Not because Job was just a windbag, but because we have more revelation, right? We have the rest of the scriptures. And so we know that what Christ has done has made it so we are permanently friends with Christ. He is our friend, just like Abraham was a friend of God. We know we're a friend of God, not because we've been so perfect and blameless, but because we have this relationship with him, because we've been forgiven. We know he's our friend. He's our advocate. He is the one who's going to stand up and plead our case. We know the accuser stands against us always as one of God's people, and yet we know we have this advocate in the heavenly places, one who will permanently be able to say, look here, look at the cut on my side. I paid for him. I paid for her. There's no accusation you can bring against them. He's not guilty in any way. I've paid entirely for him. We know that. And so we know that trials happening to us are not this hatred of God towards us. I think what we would long for Job to do at this point, as we know the rest of the book, and we know that God says that you're speaking what you don't understand. You're darkening counsel, words without knowledge. Same thing Eliphaz says to Job for a different reason. I think what we'd long for Job to say is something like, I don't get this, but I do know he's my friend. And I don't understand what he's doing, but I do know he's always good. And so I'm going to just rest in trusting that he is my friend, and he is going to act on my behalf someday. And in the meantime, I got to put up with these miserable comforters. I think that's what we wish Job would be saying. And I think that that's the point that God makes to him at the end. Were you there? Do you really think you can understand everything I've done? Of course you can't. So what if we're wishing for Job to say something like that, then what does that teach our heart? Shouldn't that be what our heart says? Yes, I am a friend of God, and I don't understand this, but of course I don't understand this. Was I there? Do I know why the ostrich sticks his head in the dirt or whatever it says? No, I don't know why they do that. I don't know any of these things. God knows all these things. I've never seen a mountain goat give birth, and yet God was created that mountain goat. Of course he knows way better than I do. And so I'm going to trust that he is my friend in the good times and in the bad times. I'm going to trust him. So let me close in prayer. Father, we thank you for our friendship with you. We thank you that there's so many days of blessing that we can cherish, that we can remember the smile on our face and the laughter and the good things and the sunshine and the cool weather and the warm weather and the trees and the beauty that you've created. And we can look at those times and rejoice in our friendship with you, that you've been so kind to us, that you've had mercy towards us, that you've forgiven us. And you've given us the greatest friendship and one that we infinitely do not deserve. But help us remember that even in trial, Father, that you've secured the payment so that we are your friends forever. And even in trial, you are still an advocate for us. You stand against the accuser. Christ stands against the accuser. We have a permanent advocate. Help us remember that, celebrate that, rejoice in our friendship in good times and bad. Help us, yes, look forward to the time when we stop sinning, when we're glorified, when we're with you and friends, not just in spirit, but in person. Help us look forward to that. But while things are still confusing in this life, help us lean on that and trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.